Okay, so this is a movie I made, I think, around 1991 in London, England, which followed my other film, The Craze. And one is about grown-up violence, and Let Him Have It is about juvenile violence. And it all deals with an incident which happened in 1953 in Croydon, where a completely innocent boy was sentenced to death and was hung by the English courts. And everybody thought that Churchill will pardon the case, or the Queen will, that somebody was going to stop it on the way up. But it never happened. And tragically, Derek Bentley, who was 17 years old, was hung at 9 o'clock one morning, which caused a tremendous havoc in England because everybody knew that he was completely innocent. And the biggest crime you could cause in England is to kill a policeman, which Derek Bentley's friend, Daniel Craig, committed the crime by killing a policeman. And they couldn't sentence him to death because he was underage. He was under 16. And Derek was older, so somebody had to hang for it. And it had to be Derek, you know. So the entire movie deals with this very tragic case, which was as famous in England as the Kennedy assassination. And everybody knew exactly where they were at 9 o'clock in the morning when Derek Bentley was hung. The film was written by Neil Purvis and Rob Wade, who were two young writers at the time, and it was their first produced script. But since then, they had reached very high acclaim, and as because they'd written all the last, I think, 2-3 Bond movies, and they wrote this wonderful script, and I loved the script. And the minute I read the script, I was absolutely obsessed about doing it, because it deals with the period of the 50s. And I, as a Hungarian refugee, came to England in 1956, which was 3 years later after this case. But it's a period which I knew very well, and was very close to my heart. And I just had to make the movie, and I'm very, very proud of it, because everybody's performance is wonderful, and the film is very emotionally touching and disturbing, and really due to the film, which we never expected at the time, which was screened at the House of Parliament as a publicity kind of stint. All the members of the parliaments were so outraged by the story of the movie that they decided to open up a re-investigation of the case. And basically it was like another trial. And after this hearing, again, it was confirmed that Derek Bentley was guilty because he was an accomplice to the killing of the policeman, which wasn't the case at all. And about 2 years after this verdict, there was yet another hearing, and finally, after 37 years later, they finally declared that Derek actually was completely innocent, and he got finally the posthumous pardon, for which his sister, Iris, had fought all her life to try to clear her brother's name. I always get very emotional when I watch the movie, and I haven't seen it for quite a long time, because it deals with such a huge kind of injustice, and it was a total kind of mistreatment of the case, and it was like a fixed trial, and the police lied. And they used it's called Let Him Have It, because, as you will see later on in the film, that's the catchphrase which Derek says to his friend when Derek was already arrested and separated from him. And he meant for him, because Craig had the gun on the cop, and Derek said, "Let him have it," meaning give up the gun. But they used this phrase in the trial that he meant to shoot to kill, which of course he didn't. And it's because of that he was sentenced to death and hung. I mean, Derek was mentally handicapped, had a very low IQ and little understanding of what was going around him. He was a very kind person. He loved animals, and he had lots of pets. And I believe they had like 5 or 6 dogs and other lots of cats. And his favorite pet was a chicken. And this chicken apparently broke its leg, and Derek mended the leg of the chicken, and it became one of his main pets, which he kept in his room. Which just proves, of what kind of person he was. And he was very gentle and would never hurt a fly.
He was caught stealing tools.
So it's very ironic that a person like that actually gets put away and gets sentenced to death and killed. Derek's father is played by this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful genius English actor Tom Courtenay. And the mother is played by Eileen Atkins, who's one of the greatest stage actresses in England. And so is Tom. And they give a tremendous kind of heart and warmth to the film. And their struggle to try to stop this sentence and the pain which that family has gone through was enormous, and they truly portrayed in a most wonderful, wonderful way. And Derek's sister is played by, who was a very young new actress, Claire Holman, who since then became one of the stars of the National Theatre in England. And all the actors are just absolutely superb. We rehearsed the movie for about a week, 10 days. It was very important to be able to reach this very emotional heights and the torment which the family goes through, and the intensity which Chris Eccleston had to play that role.
Max. Derek. Max. Got those comics for you.
Thanks, sis.
Come on, Derek. You don't want to be all on your own, do you? Cool, you could smoke kippers in here.
Don't start, Boris.
The film is set in Croydon, in a typical working class home, which we built in the studio. Michael Pickwood was the designer of the film, the same person did the craze for me. And of course, all this, the house, everything is a set which we built. A composite set, meaning that it was built over 2 stories high. So I could go in and out from one room to another. Here you see the dog, and I think you may even see the chicken in a minute, which is very difficult to get a trained chicken. But I had to have it because that's what Derek had. It's very much, very accurate to the period of the time, and also the music cues in it, the source music is terribly important to it. And in fact, strangely enough, I remembered some of the music of that time from my days in Hungary, where everything really was forbidden because Hungary was a communist country and it was completely closed off from the West. But when something is forbidden, people seem to know more about it than what it would have been like in the West. So I remembered certain songs of Kay, who sings the song in the movie, and that's how it's kind of got into the movie.
You're going to have an aerial sticking out the top of your head if you spend much more time in here, son.
This is quite a wonderful little scene, you know, when Derek is listening to his favorite song. I believe it was Kay Starr who sung it, and it becomes quite an important theme in the film, and what it means to him. The music for the film was composed by Michael Kamen and Ed Shermer, who, unfortunately, Michael is passed away a couple of years ago, and Ed used to be Michael's kind of protege, and they both collaborated on the film, and eventually Ed kind of completed all the work on it. And it's terribly important when you do period movie, you know, that the music is absolutely correct and right, because it creates a wonderful atmosphere and supports the film, which one visually is trying to kind of recreate that period. As you see here, you know, Derek is slightly behaving like, you realize that there's something not quite right with him, that he's slightly handicapped, which is what makes the story so tragic, you know, because he wasn't aware of what was going on during the trial and didn't have a clear understanding of how he was being manipulated by the judge and by the prosecution, and even by his own lawyers. You know, they kind of basically couldn't care less, you know, of what happened to him. And as long as somebody died for that crime of killing a policeman, it was perfectly fine with the legal system at the time. But as I said before, the case caused such a havoc in the legal system and in the entire country that there have been many books written on him, and several plays have been written about him. And it probably become one of the most important cases in the mistreatment of and the misuse of the law in England. And in fact, eventually it changed. There was one more hanging after him, and hanging was abolished in England. And I don't think capital punishment doesn't exist there anymore. And unfortunately, Derek is very much responsible for that, you know. I have spent a lot of time talking to Iris, and Iris's daughter, and Iris was the sister of Derek Bentley, who had dedicated her entire life to try to clear Derek's name, her brother's name. And she became a very famous kind of personality in England, and she was constantly in the newspapers and giving television interviews. And when other cases happened, when the Birmingham 5 case happened, they all went to Iris to seek her help and advise how to deal with the law in England. But I loved talking to her, and it was really difficult, you know, because it had destroyed the entire family, because it was such a tragic situation. And talking to Iris, I was asking more and more questions about what she remembers and what happened. What does she remember about it? And most of my information really came from her and also from a couple of books. And of course, from the script, which was all based on exactly the truth of what happened in the case. We had great difficulty finding, because Croydon, which is a part of London, the suburbs of London, is completely changed. And we actually had to go to Liverpool to try to recreate, and the streets I'm using as the exteriors, they were already pulling them down, and somehow we managed to talk to the local council and donated some money towards the town, and they agreed to kind of hold back the demolition of the streets for a couple of months while we were shooting. And like the cinema opposite, this record store. And here again, he walks into the shop and he wants to buy this record, this wonderful piece of music by K-Star. This wonderful young lady is actually Serena Scott Thomas, which is Christine Scott Thomas's sister. And it's the first, she has done a tremendous amount since then, but this was her first part, I think, ever. And she actually has brown hair, but I had this thing about that she had to be blonde, so this is a wig which we put on her. And she becomes quite a memorable character, even though that she's in a very short part of the film, because of the song and what it represents, and her and Derek's image of her. Again, you see the cats, the dogs. It's quite difficult to do that, because it means that you see the dog's always looking at somebody, but the trainer is just probably to the left of the camera, hiding, And if you want to make the dogs move, then you have to have two trainers on each side of the room or outside, and they give a certain signal, and then the dogs react to it and they start running to it. And trying to work with a trained chicken is totally impossible because you can't train chickens, which is the reason why you see less and less of the chickens in the film. Interestingly enough, this scene, you'll see a period train in a minute. And they do exist in England, but it's very difficult to get on railway lines and actually shoot a scene like this. So this, what you see here is, it's kind of a train club where people spend their entire weekends doing nothing else but reconstructing trains and finding the original pieces in other derelict carriages and basically rebuilding it absolutely pristine new of what these trains were like. And it's got like a 2-3 mile track, and these people spend their entire life working on these trains in all their spare time and with their spare money to kind of recreate the past. I was really fascinated by that because the dedication of the people and what these carriages and the engines look like is just wonderful. And you can't just go on any track, of course, because you're interfering with the railway system. And one would never guess just by watching a movie what it actually takes to do one of these scenes. It's much more complicated than it seems because it looks quite simple as the train is coming and puffing with the smoke, but it's quite tricky. And you see the train is traveling with quite a speed. In order to get it going, you need to start about a mile away And you see all these carriages behind and all those hangars where they build these things and rebuild them and paint them. They're just amazing. It goes back into the 20s, 30s, 40s. And it's just amazing what people do or what their hobbies are like. This is the character, Craig, who is really the bad boy in the story, who's obsessed with guns, which is an aftermath of the war, because the war ended in 1945, and there was still rationing, and you couldn't quite buy foods. You had to get tickets for butter and bread and stuff like that, and he's quite wonderful in the film, but he's the bad influence on Derek, and eventually he just gets him into trouble.
Hold it, Buster.
Not you again.
What are you up to then?
I've got to get some things.
I'll give you an hand then.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Come on, Mary.
Hello, young Derek.
Pound of sausages, please.
Is that all?
It's very important to get the art direction, the costumes, and everything right, all the hats of all the extras and what they look like. And there are certain parts of London or Liverpool or Manchester, mostly in the suburbs or in the smaller towns outside London, where you could quite easily recreate the period. But of course you have to remove all the aerials, all the signs, and you have to get period cars and period buses, which don't really work. They always break down. But as long as you get the wardrobe right and you cover up the freshly painted buildings and you create this kind of grayish tone of the film, it makes it really come alive very easily.
Derek Bentley, Vincent Montgomery,
Hello.
Terry Stringer.
I do.
Let the man sit down.
See, here these kids are all dressed in these hats and coats and all that, and they're basically trying to copy American B-movies, which was a great influence in England, particularly after the war. And that's why they dress like that, and they dress like all the American characters in the movies. And Derek, of course, feels out of place because he doesn't actually know what goes on. But eventually, this gang of boys will kind of suck him into their own world and kind of lead him towards his downfall.
I'll make you. Hey. It's the Velvet Kid.
Here again is that same wonderful cue of music playing. It's a song called You Belong to Me, which I heard in Hungary when I was a young kid and fell in love with the song, and I thought it would be wonderful to use it, particularly for this scene. And it's amazing how many people had picked up that moment in the movie, because people said that song was absolutely wonderful. And it just shows that however closed off from you are from the free world, however you repressed are, whatever little information gets into your head, it can be so vital that it becomes the epitome of the correct piece for that time.
Live if you wanted to have a shot at her. I don't suppose you'd mind, not if you're a pal of mine.
Craig's brother driving in that car, who will eventually get all of them into terrible trouble. And I love this kind of scenes in schoolrooms. A very similar scene in The Craze, and years ago I made a film called Day in the Death of Joe Egg with Ellen Bates, and again there's a classroom scene, and it just shows what it was like, the public education system in England. And everybody had to wear uniforms, these gray uniforms, and secretly, of course, they're playing with their guns, because again, it's the aftermath of the war. There was so much weapons and bullets and bombs and destroyed buildings and dead people, you know, because of the tremendous kind of bombings which London and England suffered from the Germans. This obsession about guns, it's the aftermath of the war.
You mean you never fired it?
Yeah, with 38s. You file them down, wedge them in the chamber, they work all right.
I doubt it.
Get back! Come on!
This wonderful actor, his name is Murray Melvin, who was a great, stage actor of England, one of the brilliant students of Joan Littlewood, who was a tremendously important influence in the theatre, particularly the working class theatre after the war. And she had her own theatre company, and 90% of the great actors in England grew up through her hands. And Murray has done most of her plays, but particularly he had a very famous portrayal of a Brandon Behan play called The Hostage, which is probably the greatest play written about the Irish problem. And Murray was the star of that, and it was at the Theatre Royal Stratford East Theatre in London, and then transferred to the West End, and of course it went to Broadway. And he's also very famous for a wonderful film which he made with Rita Tushingham called A Taste of Honey, which was, I think it was made probably around 1960 or 61. And I had met him when I was an assistant director to Joan Littlewood on her only movie called Sparrows Can't Sing, and we become great friends. And Murray always appears in most of my movies, playing some part. But he's an absolutely wonderful. Stanley Kubrick used him quite a lot, and he's, one of those treasured faces of the English theatre.
You don't miss a trick, do you, Derek?
Again, this scene, was shot in Liverpool, and it was freezing cold. I remember we were so cold, and we had to shoot all night because of the light, and the sun came up quite early, and also it got dark quite early, so we were shooting all night, and it was at the docks, and the wind was blowing like crazy, and it was pretty unpleasant, but nothing stops you when you're making a movie, because you forget about it and you just keep on shooting and carry on until you're finished.
No scrapes in this.
You'll never take me alive!
See, he's slightly kind of psychotic, Craig.
What are you doing, Del? Have the bogies down on us.
Maybe worse than that, pal.
I was trying to get some wonderful faces into the film, and it's very important to create an atmosphere, particularly when you're making a period movie, that the faces look period. And one has to be very careful. We had to cut everybody's hair, and it has to have a certain look. And one has to keep a very tight control over everything, particularly the costumes and the color and the behavior, so it doesn't become too modern.
So you're Derek, are you?
Yeah. Pleased to meet you.
It's really weird watching the movie, you know, because I now realize that actually we made the film in 1990, so that's exactly 15 years ago. And although one remembers every frame of it, and I remember every frame which I wanted to shoot and I didn't shoot, you know, you have an incredible recollection of the pieces. But sometimes it's just difficult to remember names, you know. And Derek Bentley's friend, the young boy, you know, who got him into trouble, his character's name is actually Chris Craig, and it is played by this wonderful young actor called Paul Reynolds. Anyhow, they had a very interesting relationship because the mentally handicapped Derek Bentley looked up to him and then tried to copy him. And the father's character, Tom's character, realizes that he's a very bad influence and tried to do everything to keep him away from him and to forbid him to see his son. But it never worked. He was a cheeky bugger, and he just got in under everybody's skin and eventually led both of them into terrible trouble, you know, to this incident at the end of the movie and of the actual death of his son. But those things, when they happen, it's very difficult to do something about it, you know. As a father, you know something is very wrong, but it's very difficult to tell children, you know, what they can do or what they can't do. You see, here he's gradually trying to become like the rest of the gang. And they're obsessed with American movies, the way they dress, and it's a mixture of kind of teddy boys and kind of the era where Elvis Presley appeared in America and how he dressed, and they're trying to copy him. I mean, even in Hungary, where everything was forbidden, you know, everybody was trying to copy Elvis Presley, even though that his music was not allowed to be played.
What's doing then?
Hark the coruscated oriole thither.
You'll see in a minute that the cinema which is behind them is playing the movie The White Heat, which is exactly what I was trying to do. In a minute they walk away and you'll see their shadow. We throw a shadow over the poster of at the cinema advertising. You know, I was trying to just make an allegory out of it. But here he gets absolutely kind of wooed into to join the gang, and he becomes part of them. And Chris's brother gives him his own coat, you know, lends him the coat, so he will look like what they look like.
My women. It's clever. It's made out of the stuff that don't crease. You need a hat. Borrow this one for a while. Oh, lovely.
Cheers.
See, he thinks he's now made it in the eyes of his friend, and he's become one of them.
Catch you later, brats.
There you go, Derek. You're one of us. Let's go.
is the shadow? There it is. Yeah. One keeps straight to these buses. We only had 2 period buses, and we had to make them turn around the corner and come back the other way to keep the street busy. Can't tell you what it takes to get these shots with the dogs. Somebody's hiding outside the wall, somebody's inside there, somebody's at the kitchen, so they run off that way.
Have you been with Craig?
Did he come round here?
Tom Courtney said to me during the film, he said, I'm really getting old, because years ago I would have played him. And now I'm playing the father. He said, it just shows time is moving on. And I known Tom actually probably for 40 years. He was a huge star in England. He made these wonderful movies like The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. And he was in Dr. Zhivago, and extraordinary plays he performed in. And he really was and is one of the major actors in England. Every year I go back to London, he's always starring another play in the West End. And he has a very particular way of speaking. He has an incredible voice. And just the most sensational stage presence. I was very lucky, actually, to get him. And he wasn't my first idea for casting, because sometimes when you're casting a film, you don't think of the most obvious choices. You're trying this and that name, and the studio wants to have a bigger name, a big star name, and Tom really was the last sort. And I haven't seen him at that time, probably for about 10, 15 years. So I wanted to have a cup of tea with him. And his agent was very upset that me having known him all my life, I still wanted to just check on him. But I said, I haven't seen Tom for 15 years, and I just would love to just see whether he's not too young or too old for the part. And Tom heard about it, and he called up and he said, I hear you want to see me. I said, why don't we meet for a cup of tea at, there's a very famous actors club in England called the Garrick Club. And Tom was waiting for me upstairs in this huge room, which is surrounded by these enormous leather chairs. And the minute I opened the door and I saw Tom sitting in the far corner, I just looked at him and I said, you want me to crawl towards you and beg you to play this part? Because I realized immediately, without speaking a word with him, that he would be absolutely perfect for the role. When we were rehearsing the film, the entire cast met with Iris and Iris's daughter. It was very important for Tom and for Eileen and for Claire to get to know the family and to ask questions, what they were like, the kind of things they were doing, how they behaved. It's tremendously important to go very deep into the research and to find out everything. And in fact, Iris has given us some of the ties, which was Derek's tie, and some of the clothes, just that we know exactly what it was like.
What are you doing here?
The bogies have been all over me house.
Why?
Didn't you hear about it? Niv's gang pulled a job down Waltham Abbey. Now they're looking for them.
Jesus.
Come on, sneak out. I know where they're hiding.
Why? What are we going to do?
We're going to go down there and see if they need any help. Come on.
I had the most wonderful cameraman in the film, director of photography, as they call it sometimes, Oliver Stapleton, his name, and he's one of the great DPs of the world. Years ago, he did My Beautiful Laundrette. And ever since then, he has done a tremendous amount of the movies in England and also here in America. He's one of the great cameramans, and I was so fortunate to have worked with him, and as a tremendous force, because shooting a film is incredibly exhausting, particularly when you're shooting at night and you keep shooting till 4, 5 o'clock until the daylight comes up, and your brain just gets fried, and you notice that the crew, the later you're working, there's less than people, there's about 150 people around you normally during the day, but the deeper you go into the night, the less people you're surrounded with, and then eventually half of the crew is asleep in the caravans and trailers, or and you're stuck on the roof or in the park just shooting away. And eventually it comes down to the cameraman, the director, the first assistant director, and the actors, the camera operator, and you just have to keep pushing all the time to complete the day's or the night's work. And it's like running an army. It's like fighting a war. It's incredibly physical and exhausting. And I normally, when I'm filming, I sleep like maybe 3-4 hours at night. And you come into your apartment or the hotel, wherever you're living, completely exhausted at night. And then you just collapse and you go to sleep. But then on 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, you get up and then start looking at the script. And then you start to make this list of shots, which is always an impossible list, which directors normally prepare. It's called a shot list. And then you make this list of what you need to complete tomorrow's sequences. And then basically one never ever looks at that list, but it is in your head in a way. And you may not do it as you planned it, because it's very important to keep oneself open, that to include the actors or to include the locations, to include everything. So, because ideas come up all the time, and you see things different. It's important to have an idea how to do it if nothing else comes up. But it's wonderful when you rehearse a scene and you suddenly see a tiny things which may start you shooting the sequence. And it's absolute magic when that happens. And it's important that as a director, one keeps an open mind to allow to respond and to react to the actors, to the locations, to a car maybe breaking down, or it's raining, or it's snowing. It doesn't matter what, but problems can suddenly lead you into new areas, and it makes it very fresh. And it's very important to keep things very fresh, rather than do it in a very safe, normal way. One is always striving for the unusual, but you don't want to intrude on the story. So quite often one's most brilliant thoughts about how to shoot a scene you have to discard with, because it's so great, that it interferes with everything. And so it's just important the most important thing is to create an atmosphere that your actors can function and that they feel safe, so they can try things which comes to their mind, which comes to the director's mind. And quite often you're so tuned into each other that me standing behind the camera or next to the camera, I never look at the monitor. I detest looking at the monitor, which is unfortunately all the young kids who directing, it's an influence from rock videos and commercials. They're just staring at the monitor. And I think it's the most criminal thing, because on the monitor you cannot see anything. You can't see a nuance of a performance. You don't look into the soul of the actor. And as a director, if you are next to the camera or you're behind the camera, somehow you have this kind of more or less like a supernatural mental connections into each other's soul. And it's terribly important for me to look the actors into the eye, because I can see into their heart, and I realize what's happening. And quite often one just have to think of something, and then miraculously you wonderful actors beginning to do it, if one is very tuned into each other without even speaking to each other.
Well done.
Look, fuck off!
So it's terribly important not to remove the director. The actors need the help, they need that camera there in a certain close proximity in order to give the right performance for a close-up. And if the director, you see, like here, one is looking right into his soul. And if you put the camera about 1.5 feet to the right or to the left, you completely miss that connection. And it's terribly important. The same here with the judge, that camera is right in that line. So you see inside their soul. And actors are the most magical instrument. It's very difficult to be an actor, to be normal, and to create something which is very simple when that camera is rolling, because one is functioning in a completely artificial environment. When facing these two actors, there's about 18 lights, a couple of balloons in the ceiling, which is reflecting a diffused light. And they make you believe that they're talking to each other. And in order to do that, one has to create a very safe environment for them. So they feel good, that the chair is comfortable, that the shoe doesn't hurt, that they feel at peace and at rest, so they can just concentrate on performing. Not to allow any outside influence to come in, but to put them at ease. And I think that's the first duty of a director, is to create that environment and atmosphere. I love actors, and I think it shows in all my movies, because I really fight to create that atmosphere, to make them comfortable. Which doesn't mean that they don't do very uncomfortable scenes, but it's in order to convey that, you have to be at peace with yourself, and then you can function. That's why it's very important to rehearse before you start filming, because the actors meet each other. I mean, can you imagine suddenly turning up on the stage first thing in the morning, and you have never met each other, and they have to do a love scene, you have to get to bed, you have to make love to each other, or you have to kill each other, or so it's terribly, terribly important to rehearse a movie so everybody meets, and also to create an atmosphere when you can make a fool of yourself, so you can try things, to get ideas, and not so much improvise. I hate the word of improvisation, because I really believe it's very important to have very strongly structured script and to follow that, But when you get into trouble, then you could improvise on that a bit. But then you have to go back to the structure of the script, because if you just improvise an entire movie, it's like driving a car on ice. It could go in any direction. And you have to know as a director from A to B where you want to go with the story. So it's a big kind of misused word, improvisation. It's good to do it in rehearsal, because you're building the character and you want to test it out and find out areas which don't even appear on the screen. But it will help the actors to create and to find the foundation of that character. I love this little bit, when he puts the gun next to those toy cars, because it shows the tragedy of the entire movie. because they're just kids messing about, and it gets them into terrible, terrible, terrible trouble. And it's the circumstance of life.
Derek! Wrong coupon again. This one's for the fish shop. Give me the one for the butcher's.
It's interesting, you know, because you can put that camera in this scene in 20 different places, but I always say there's only one right place to be, and it's very important that you find that, you know, and that's what one is driving towards when you start rehearsing the scenes before the film, or when you rehearse the scene just before you start shooting. I mean, what one does is you run the scene first with the actors, then you look at your location and you start placing it. And meanwhile, one is always trying to figure out, how am I going to shoot this? What am I going to do? How many shots do I need to convey this scene? Because the interesting thing in a movie, it can be 2 hours long, but basically it comes down to, unless one is really extravagant and shoot tremendous amount of footage, but it comes down to maybe 750, 600 or 800 setups, which means that it's 800 basically still pictures, because each setup is another frame. And with those frames, as a director, you tell the story of your movie. So it's a totally kind of artificial way of creating it. And it always amazes me, you know, how real it becomes, this artificial form of creating. It just so happens that years ago, when movies have started, which first started in amusement parks and with all that kinematograph stuff, eventually, at the same time, 2 or 3 people created the first movie cameras with the 35mm film with sprocket holes each side and this wheel with this teeth in it driving it at 24 frames per second, which was the most perfect way to record movement. And that camera, which was originally created, still today is the same camera after all these years. And now it's made by Panavision or by Arriflex or all that. But it's the same kind of movement. I mean, there are 2, 3 different types of movements. But it's those wheels pulling those films through at 24 frames per second. And it happens to be the most perfect way to record action, drama, comedy. And there's a lot of talk about digital, and of course, eventually, all the digital systems will replace film. But film itself is absolute magic, you know, and the smell of that film, of actually handling film in your hand, it's like a religious thing, and it was the most perfect invention, you know, which it's gradually fading, but it hasn't gone yet, because there still isn't a digital camera which could match what you can do with a film camera. And I still feel it's probably still going to take another 20 years before they can perfect it. And then film will become derelict. But it was wonderful with black and white films. Black and white was just magic, and the old Academy frame. Then color film came in, and then everybody's effort is to try to make color film and bring it very close to what black and white is, by diffusing the colors and keeping all the costumes in certain browns and grays and golden tones. So there isn't anything which jumps out at it. So it becomes kind of a monochromic kind of texture.
Okay, Chris?
Thanks, Monty.
I mean, I was fortunate enough. I mean, I wish sometimes I would have lived earlier because I would have loved to have been around in the 40s in films, because I love black and white so much. But having arrived to England in 1956 from Hungary and entered the film business immediately, I still kind of just got in towards the tail end of what that magical period was in British movies. And I had the fortune to work on movies where I was second assistant or third assistant to Carol Reed or Fred Zinnemann, or I witnessed watching David Lean several times, when in some of the scenes or the tests, for Lawrence of Arabia, and Stanley Kubrick in his early days. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful period. So Carol Reed, on a film called The Key, and Fred Zinnemann on Sundowners with Robert Mitchum and Deborah Kerr and Peter Ustinov. And you can't learn directing by watching other people do it. But it's very important because you see how things are done. And then when you begin to walk as a director and start to direct your first movie, I really believe that you only learn by your own mistakes, and you know what didn't quite work and you know what did work. And you teach yourself. I think that's the only way to learn. I mean, the basic technique one can learn at film school, or you can learn it from books, or you can do it by just watching other people direct. But it doesn't mean anything until you do it yourself. It's very easy to criticize, saying, I wouldn't have put the camera in this angle, on that angle. But because you're already doing it one way and the choices are 800 different ways of doing it. So it's very important to fulfill your vision, to have a vision. As a director, you have to know what you are after. You have to know what you're trying to create. And it's basically running an army. And you have to be always full of energy and be absolutely up for it. And you can't get tired and you can't give up, because the minute you give up, the entire crew somehow unconsciously senses that, and they slow down and they suddenly drag their feet and nothing happens and everything takes forever. But you have to be there as a director to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to complete that day's work or that night's work. And it's all very carefully figured out, way ahead, that say a movie would take 2-3 months to shoot, but each day you have to complete your work, because you start slipping behind, it can be disastrous.
Mummy, come and look.
What is it, Victoria?
That man.
Yes, I see. What on earth's he doing?
Here is one is beginning the setup of the whole crime, which is going to be committed very soon. And, little by little, the neighbors discovering these 2 kids climbing up into the roof of this factory. And they eventually alerting the police to it. And it's slowly, the trap is beginning to close around them. Again, we're shooting all nights, for several days here on the roof of this building, and it was incredibly cold and tremendously windy, which is great because it shows the brass, but it's not great because everybody was freezing to death at the same time.
You go first.
So this kind of shots are quite tricky, because you see the cameras going up on a crane, and it just is important to kind of go for what you see in your mind, that tracking shot's going up. Now he's trying to get him to go up, and how you shoot it, how you cut it, and how you create kind of tension.
Croydon Police Station, can I help you?
Cutting is very, very important, and it's like measuring out poison.
Don't look down, dimwit.
Shut it.
Car 5Z, 5Z, come in. 5Z.
It's a wonderful actor called Tom Bell. He's an absolute genius. Was a big star in the early 60s. And you may remember him from Prime Suspect, that wonderful television show with Helen Mirren and Tom. I used Tom, in fact, twice, both in The Craze and Let Him Have It. And it's heaven, absolute heaven to work with.
Bring a ladder next time, Del, you know?
Don't fancy doing that again?
Don't worry about it. You won't have to. Come on, wise guy. Let's do it.
So I picked this location because I wanted to have lights in the background, so you have this feeling that you're on the top of the roof. And in fact, you know, this was a flat roof where we built these pieces of sets. So we kind of created it, but we were still, I don't know, 5, 6 stories up. I was very consciously trying to recreate of the exact location of what happened in the real story. I mean, that building was, of course, pulled down by then. So we had to make our own space.
On the roof, there's 2 of them.
We can sing from our window. It's right opposite, you see.
I think over the back.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't actually look that high, but I mean, it's about 3 or 4 stories high, that building.
4. You want to get down again, don't you? Shit. Wait here.
But it is, you know, there were diagrams in the trial and everything was described of what exactly happened. And when we built this set, you know, we exactly copied the actual roof where this killing took place. It's very important when you make real life stories, you know, that you don't, that you find out everything about what had happened. And you have to work out your own truth of that situation. And it's very important to present the exact, accurate case.
If they catch me with these.
The gun is always very dominant because he was obsessed with guns. And it was because of his brother, the older brother, you know, with the blonde girl. And that's what influenced him and got him into terrible trouble because he was trying to live up to his older brother.
I'm a police officer, show yourselves.
If you want us, why don't you fucking well come and get us?
Don't be so bloody stupid.
This place is surrounded, you hear me?
You see, this is very important. Here he basically gets pulled away by the cop. So they separated. And therefore he cannot be responsible for the shooting which will take place. And Derek is under arrest now on the other side of that elevator shaft.
Give that thing to me.
Let him have it, Chris!
So that's what caused his death, you know, when he said, let him have it. And this is not the killing, but this is where the cop gets wounded. And it's crystal clear that Derek stands here with the detective.
You're under arrest, of course.
Under arrest. While Chris is by the elevator shaft. And here the police gets alerted that there's a shooting took place on the roof. And they will start issuing guns because in England, you know, policemen never carry gun.
You ain't getting up here that way. Break your neck doing that, copper.
And the whole geography of this scene is exactly following of what happened on the roof, with the other cop trying to climb on the roof, moving along the skylight, him reloading, the ambulance coming. Here I'm just trying to emphasize his madness for guns.
Surrounded! Give yourself up!
See, it's crystal clear, and it's crystal clear in the testimony of the case that they were separated.
I've got the keys. The kid's off his head.
Come on, you brave coppers! Where are you, Bill?
We're on your right! Kids on the left!
Yeah, let me.
So this is crucial, what happens now, there.
Milo? Milo?
You bastard!
So nobody can believe actually what had happened, and
Come on in, you fuckers! I'm only 16!
it's the worst crime you can commit in England is to kill a policeman.
You killed him.
Stay back!
You killed him.
Stay back or I'll blow your fucking head off as well! I mean it!
She's completely out of control and is flipped out.
gun to you, bastard! Bastard!
See, even he had to go and get a gun. He didn't have a gun as a detective. Nobody has guns, and you didn't used to have guns. It's changed now, of course. I love this bit because it's exactly what had happened. Again, it's so unbelievable that he just does this. And he survived this fall because he fell through this greenhouse and landed in pots of flowers.
I wish I was fucking dead. I've killed the fucking lot of you.
It's very important to create the right atmosphere with when he crashes down through that greenhouse, of how you show his injury or the fact of falling down and hurting himself, and it's all done with makeup and just the shots. You know, you create these shots which tells the stories.
Mrs. Miles, Sir David Maxwell Fyfe, the Home Secretary.
My sincerest condolences, Mrs. Miles. Justice will be done.
My lord, and members of the jury.
This courtroom is quite unique. It was in Liverpool, and it's a disused courtroom, and it's quite beautiful. I just fell in love with it when I saw it. And it's quite a tricky shot, this, because it's a constantly moving tracking shot. And by some miracle, I was able to lay the tracks in a half a circle around the courtroom so I can move, because the camera is constantly moving with the dolly. The grips are pushing the camera, and it in one shot, it really tells the whole story of what's happening. I always feel that it's much better to shoot in kind of master shots if one can do it, and physically move the camera from A to B, and this is going through the jury, and then it ends up on the judge in a minute. Because it just conveys the atmosphere of the room, and it's much better than just cutting from one thing to another, because you telling it for real. It has a real time, however long that shot takes.
And this is where you stood? Yes, sir. Craig behind the lift head and Bentley just behind you? Yes, sir.
Again, all the dialogue here actually follows the actual recordings of the court, of what was said and what happened. Again, one is trying to make it really, really authentic. This is a wonderful actor, James Villiers, and that's Michael Gough. It's people I worked together for years. James was in my movie of Ruling Class, and unfortunately, they both passed away. But that's what happens when you started making movies a long time ago. And I've been directing 37 years. And I was incredibly fortunate to work with some of the most wonderful actors in the world. And it gives one a very rich experience, but also wonderful kind of memory to have worked with these incredible actors. And in the kind of movies we were making at the time, it's makes one feel very, very, very rich.
No, sir. Sergeant Fairfax, at this stage, did you have hold of Bentley? No, sir. So, in other words, he was free to run and join his friend if he had so wished, even though you had just cautioned him?
Yes, I suppose so, sir.
No further questions, my lord.
You may stand down, Mr. Fairfax.
Anyhow, this trial sequence was really, really, really tricky to shoot it because so many things have happened in it. And I was trying to recreate the tragedy of and the whole manipulation of the prosecution, and it was a very, very challenging scene.
Now, between the age of 11 and your present age, 16, how many firearms have you had?
Paul Reynolds is a sensational actor, and he and Chris, you know, they didn't really get on too well because they're very similar, and so I had to keep an eye on them all the time to make sure they don't beat each other up, you know. And quite often I looked up and I saw the trailer shaking, you know, and they were about to go at each other, and I had to rush in and separate them. It's a very, very taxing role for Christopher, and Christopher it was his first movie, not the first time he acted because he's already done quite a bit in the theater, but it really demanded a tremendous amount from him, and Chris was at that time a very kind of a loner of a person, and he spent a lot of time on his own, and we spent quite a bit of time together, and I cared and care for him very much, you know, because I think he's a superb talent. But one needs as a director to be there, to mirror him on the other side of that camera, to know exactly where he is emotionally in those scenes. And we got very, very close during the movie. The same with Paul, I mean, same with all my actors, because as I said before, I love my actors. But it's just very, very important to be there for them, to help them, because it's a very, very lonely journey for them when they're standing in front of that rigid camera and they have to convey something and then they have to perform. And I'm very proud of Chris, of where his whole career went after this movie and the heights he has achieved over the years. But for me, he will always be that Chris who played Derek Bentley years ago, which is now 15 years, because time flies so fast that it's kind of frightening. He's incredibly sensitive, Chris. He's the most wonderful eyes and body language. And like it's very important, you know, where his eye line is, of how he's looking, or the intensity of it. And I think he's just magic.
Heard you say that a lot.
After Craig started firing, did you ever shout out, "For God's sake, don't fire," or "Shut up doing that"?
Can't remember, sir.
And one looks back at it, you know, he looks like a baby compared to what Chris looks like now. Not that he's changed that much, but his head is shaved, and he plays the most extraordinary roles since this movie. And I'm very proud to have been there in the kind of first major step he had taken in the movies or on the silver screen. It's wonderful to be there in a young actor's life, you know, to witness their rise of how they conquer this business and how they reach extraordinary heights in it. It gives one a very kind of special in to have known each other at that time. And I'm really, really proud to have been there and was instrumental in just helping him achieve that performance, which was quite extraordinary in the film.
If we examine and think about Bentley's behavior on the rooftop, he not struggling, standing alongside the police sergeant during the battle, and at no time attempting to escape. Surely these actions are more consistent with a boy asking his friend to have the gun back.
James Villiers was a great friend of Ronnie Fraser, who's also in the film, who was quite an extraordinary actor in the English movies, who plays a judge. And because we were great friends, I was able to get him to just play that couple of days role. But it was a celebration for us to be together again. And it's wonderful when you can cast, not that you cast friends, but people who are right for the parts, but they're friends because it's the best way to see each other when you're working together. It's an extraordinary feeling because there's such a wonderful kind of closeness, and you walk in each other's guts and your inner side of your body. It's a very, very rich experience.
And urged us to use common sense in this case. Well, I too, gentlemen of the jury.
Working with people who you love. Which doesn't mean that I wouldn't work, because quite often I use people whose first movie they were, so I haven't worked with them. But it's also great to work with people who you know and you worked with. There's a relationship and a trust with each other. And it's great to discover each other, having not worked together before.
These youths are not children. One is 16, the other 19.
This is one of those shots, you know, where the railway lines go up from the back of the courtroom, and it goes round in a U shape, goes right round onto the other side. And had the camera didn't fit, it was like 1 inch left on each side. Then I couldn't have done this shot. I mean, I could have done it with a Steadicam, but it wouldn't have been the same, because it's very important to be smooth, and it's a long speech of the judge summoning everything up, and I think it's just much more exciting to go through the entire room and to convey what is actually going and hearing it and watching everybody's face, and you're really recreating the moment for real. It gives an incredible joy to achieve a shot like this in a film, because I could have done this same scene and I would have needed to do probably 20 different shots. And here I managed to do it in one shot.
The teeth. One carries a gun, ammunition, and a dagger. The other also had a dagger, and... Where is that knuckle duster? This apparently was given to Bentley by Craig.
That's another actor, Vernon Dobchev, who I very often use. He's got a wonderful face and appeared in many, many, many films over the years.
Side to stab. This weapon will be available to you, together with the other evidence.
I worked with Michael Gough, actually, I'm trying to think, probably 40 years ago, prior to this. I've been known each other for many, many years, and when I read the script, I said it would be incredible to get Michael for this role. Of course, by then he played the butler in Batman, so he was very famous in America. But that's not why I put him in. I really put him in because of my connection to him in the past, and also that he's just an extraordinary, wonderful actor and has got this wonderful face to play the judge.
Members of the jury, I will ask you to retire.
This is still the same shot right from the beginning, but you end up in a very close size to show the inserts. And I love this courtroom. It is so great. Their relationship in the film was quite extraordinary. The brother and sister. And to me, it was Iris, of course, the real sister, because I was fortunate enough to have met her. And a couple of years after the movie, she passed away because she had cancer. And after she had died, her daughter came to see me in Ireland while I was shooting another movie. And she said, "My mom wrote this letter to you before she died, and there's a little gift in it for you from her." And there was this extraordinary letter thanking me for making the movie. And when I opened this box, in the box was Derek's ring, which was his favorite ring, so Iris has given it to me, and I was so touched, I just went back to I was shooting something else in Dublin at the time, but I just was howling, because it was so touching.
Guilty. With a recommendation for mercy.
You find both prisoners guilty, and that is the verdict of you all?
It is.
Eileen Atkins is an extraordinary actress. And the real reason why I did the movie is what happens from this point on to the end, which is probably the last 20 minutes of the film, because of the extraordinary struggle of the family to try to stop this insanity of this verdict that he was sentenced to death to be hung. And the incredible effort on Tom Courtney's character's part, the father's part, to try to do everything to save his son. And what happens when he completely fails at doing it. And the tragedy, what it brings about. And it's the pain and the pathos of that situation, which is truly the reason why I made the movie. This is kind of quite a bizarre moment, because when this happens and they put the black cap on the judge, it means that he's going to bring about a sentence of death. And it's a ritual kind of movement in the court of England of what happens when you sentence someone to death. So people knew in the court immediately that one of them going to get the death penalty. It was just a question of which one. And as Derek was completely innocent, it came as a total kind of shock, horror, and surprise not just to the family, but to the entire country.
Amen.
Take him down.
And he actually doesn't understand what is being done or being said.
And now will Detective Sergeant Fairfax, Police Constable MacDonald, and Police Constable Harrison stand up? The conduct...
I love this, the whole geography of this courtroom is just brilliant, because that's what used to happen, that when people got sentenced, they were taken down from the dock, which was where the so-called criminals stood, and they were taken down into the basement of the courtroom, which was basically a holding prison. And it was just extraordinary to have it actually there like that. And gave me a wonderful chance to show and shoot and the geography of the scene. The prison visiting scenes were quite kind of extraordinary to shoot. Of course, we built this as a set in the studio. The exterior is an exterior, which is a real prison in London. And I just love the atmosphere of these scenes, because it's so tragic and it's so sad and it's so hopeless. And it's so real at the same time. Where they meet him for the first time, having been sentenced to death.
Hello, Mum. Hello, Dad. Hello, Iris. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, son.
We'll have our party when you get out, as soon as this stupid mistake's been cleared up.
They're very, very emotional, these scenes, because it expresses the hopelessness of the situation. Although at this point they are convinced that they will get him off and it will work. And Derek doesn't quite understand what anybody is talking about.
They've never carried out the sentence when the judge and jury recommended mercy.
We rehearsed these scenes before the movie, and then, of course, I rehearsed it just before we shot it. And it's so intense, and it's so emotional, and it's so kind of tragic, because they're separated by this glass wall, and they can't touch each other, and...
It won't be long.
I don't mind waiting.
It's so cruel.
You should hear the jokes the warder's been telling me. I'm gonna have Dennis in stitches when I get back.
Particularly when he's trying to convince them that he's okay and not to worry about him.
More mail, Mrs. Bentley. We've detailed a special van for you. See? Excuse me.
I love this little street, Michael Pickwood was the designer of the film, and he's an extraordinary designer. And you'll see later on that street, just in one shot, represents their entire kind of working class background of what it was like to live in that kind of an environment. And however poor they were, there's a tremendous beauty in that street and a vision in it. And I naively enough, I wanted to be able to shoot at the Parliament, because this scene's supposed to take place in the Parliament, but of course we didn't get permission to shoot there. And but this room, which you'll see in a minute, is actually the outside of the courtroom. So I've been able to shoot the court sequences and also the Parliament.
The feeling is that the British judicial system is now on trial, and it will be guilty indeed.
This gentleman was an extraordinary actor by the name of Michael Elphick, who again I've worked with for over 30 years. And as a big favor, he gave me a couple of days on a Sunday so I could shoot with him because he was quite a big star in England. Extraordinary actor who never really achieved the kind of heights which he should have gone. But he was just a brilliant actor who, again, unfortunately passed away. It's sad to look at some of these movies, you know, because when you see how many wonderful people were in it who are not with us anymore, but it's at the same time wonderful to be able to still look at them. Tom has an extraordinary voice, which is instantly recognizable.
Well, what are your plans now, sir?
How do you mean?
You mean you haven't heard the news?
What news?
There's such a simplicity about him and directness and wonderful, wonderful presence. To express this father figure who is not very strong, yet he pretends to be strong, but the situation pushes him into extraordinary kind of limits and areas. And it's true, he was getting millions of letters, you know, which the postman used to deliver in sacks full of letters from the public. And the cruelty that it's just one of those letters is informing them, you know, that there's just no chance, that it's gone past every legal step and the verdict is still sticking. She's extraordinary, Eileen. She's just one of the greatest actresses of the English theatre. And it was such a gift and luck. She loved the script and we wanted to work together for years, and it gave us a wonderful opportunity to be together and recreate this kind of tragedy, which was so important to all of us because of the injustice of the verdict and the cruelty and the disgusting kind of cover up from the police, you know, where they outright lied in court just to prove that this boy was guilty.
Dad will tell me, won't he? If it hurts.
I love these big close-ups of Derek because one just gets inside his soul to show the pain and the emotion, what's going on.
I'm writing to the Queen that there's nothing more we can do.
We must not let an innocent boy hang. Down with the death penalty.
And there were tremendous protests going on at the time in England. And everybody was petitioning and fighting and tremendous kind of movement to save him. And the frustration of the public to realize that it wasn't getting anywhere. It was probably one of the most tragic cases in English history. It's wonderful because just with that little emotion from Tom, you just get inside his soul completely. And kind of, you're inside his heart, witnessing what he's going through.
You are Shadow Iris. You'll have to wash that stuff off when I get home. There's old Pop, grinding his teeth again.
It's so wonderful because Derek is trying to convince them that he's really okay and please not to worry, everything is going to be okay.
You stroke the dogs for me?
Of course I will.
And the family just trying to cover up their own emotions and then show 1 ounce of them feeling the tragedy of it all. It's an incredibly wonderful kind of working class bravery, what that family represented, and the determination. And I mean, Derek's father actually, he wrote a wonderful book about it all afterwards, you know. And he then dedicated the rest of his life about trying to get kids off the street so they don't get into trouble like his son did, you know. But he kind of created like a working class club for young children to educate them and to occupy them. It was so tragic because each year after Derek had died, the family just struggled on and petitioned on forever to try to clear his name, even though that he was dead.
I'll be back as soon as I hear. There's still hope.
I absolutely love this little scene because I'm half a mile away from Tom, but you'll see that his expression, you know, of the news he's given in a minute and how he reacts to it and what his body language is just absolutely brilliant. It has more value than if I would be sticking 1 inch away from his face.
I don't know what to say. They won't discuss the case until the sentence has been carried out.
Which is set for 9 a.m. tomorrow.
This is all exactly the truth, you know. This gentleman, Clive Revel, who's a wonderful actor, who played Fagin on Broadway in Oliver Twist years ago. Again, is a great friend, and as a favor, he came and did this for me. And he plays Pierpont, and Pierpont was the hangman of England. And it was a 3rd generation in the family, and the entire family was a family, that was their occupation. And they got £5 for each hanging. And he used to turn up at the prison the night before the hanging, and observe the prisoner in the exercise yard. And then he used to go up to him and just shake hands. And the prisoner didn't know who he was. And just by shaking the prisoner's hand, he was able to measure the weight of the person and could figure out, oh, this is the street which I'm talking about, which to me is like a painting because it represents these endless little houses, these attached English working class houses which was built by the factories. And they're all exactly the same layout. And anyhow, so by just shaking the hand of the prisoner, he could judge the weight and the size and could figure out the length of the rope, you know. And what it actually would take to execute a person.
And tell Pop not to grind his teeth. And Dad, keep a strict eye on Dennis. If he does anything wrong...
Hey, slow down.
If he does...
And the prison guards, I mean, they all had a tremendous sympathy towards Derek because they knew that he was innocent. But there's nothing they could do. So they just were with him. I mean, they become like prisoners, the prison guards, because they're each other's prisoners. And they actually emotionally go through everything which a prisoner would go through. And they're really there to support him, a part of the fact to guard him.
What do you think, Mum? This letter may sound a bit solemn.
But as I said before, all these scenes in the prison and at the home of the family, in these last 15, 20 minutes of the film, which absolutely fueled me to make the movie. And it is emotionally every reason why I wanted to do it. Because it was such an extraordinary circumstances and such a tragic situation that I just wanted to be there to... I mean, in my mind, I was trying to have Derek, you know, of course, who wasn't around anymore. But by treading in his footsteps, it was kind of an extraordinary feeling of feeling his presence throughout the whole film.
That's a very nice letter, Derek.
She couldn't even write. This just expresses the helplessness of the whole family. Of what can you do? Well, it's 20 to 9 and you know it's going to happen at 9 o'clock. And you're completely paralyzed. I mean, this kind of shots will stay with me forever because for me, it just expresses the total emotion and the tragedy and the awfulness and the love of the relationship between the postman and the father and the house and the street and that working class life and the loneliness of the situation. It's just so wonderfully perfect, you know.
Which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
And of course, one is trying to manipulate the situation of how you create these shots or how you cut them together or how between those looks of each other just touches the audience's heart more and more and more.
And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us.
I spent a lot of time talking to Iris and questioning her exactly what happened at 9 o'clock and how she felt all about it. And that's Iris, the young girl, the daughter, of course. And she told me everything about it. And I really conceived the end of the film according of what I had discovered from her, which I'll tell you afterwards, you know, of how I got to this kind of ending. Apparently there was like about 1,000 people outside the prison that morning.
For thou art with me, thy rod and thy...
Stand up! Drink that quick.
No prisoner, sir.
Hands behind your back.
This is all exactly according to the records of what happened and how it was done. I desperately tried to make, according to the records of Pierpont, the hangman, he said that he knew that Derek was innocent, and because of that, when he knew that the prisoner was innocent, he hung them very quickly. And the hanging actually took 47 seconds from the moment of him coming into the prisoner's cell. And however fast I was doing the hanging, I couldn't do it fast enough of how quickly it was done. And then in my conversations with Iris, she told me, I said, well, what happened at 9 o'clock exactly? And she said, I couldn't take it anymore. And we were all hanging on to each other and we were crying in the middle of the living room. And I just couldn't take it. So I walked out into the street and I walked away from our house and I looked back and I saw a white light hit the house. And I said to myself, I knew Derek was back. And then she told me about this clock, and she said, you know, the clock broke at 9 o'clock and I could never get it repaired. And then she took me up to her bedroom and showed me the clock, which was frozen at 9 o'clock. And that's why I put this shot into the film, that this is how the movie ends, with the clock stopping on the stroke of the 9 o'clock. And I found that so unbelievable that I just had to put, and that his soul was coming back the minute he died, that it went through the roof and came back down into their house, into their world, you know. And she said, I knew Derek was back and he was there to protect us ever since then. And I just found that so unbelievable that I insisted putting it into the movie. And I had tremendous fights with the distribution company because, of course, that's what they wanted to lose from the film. And they said, well, the movie's over when he's hung, you know. And I said, but you can't take that out because his soul has to come back. And bless their heart, you know, they're given in at the end, you know. And it just really makes not that it makes it extraordinary, but it makes you feel what that family have felt at 9 o'clock in the morning. And there's nothing they could do about it. And I don't know. It was just very important for me to make this movie, and I'm very, very proud of it. And it was a fantastically wonderful experience, you know, because I'd never realized that the film would do that or could do that, and that wasn't my intention with it. But because of the film, eventually his name was cleared. And they finally admitted that they made a terrible mistake, you know, and he should never have been hung. And the tragedy of it was that Iris had died, I think, 2-3 months before they finally cleared his name. And it was just very sad, you know, that they couldn't live long enough to see it, because that was the entire struggle and journey of her life, you know, to, even though that her brother was dead, but to finally have the court system admit in front of the entire world that it was a terrible mistake. And because of that, it was worthwhile for me to make the movie.